I thought I was doing all the things that you should do to make your marriage better. Like, I would explain to him that I had a deep concern about his lack of affection. Right. And I remember even saying to him, the average couple has sex 2.5 times per week. And we haven't done it in 2 weeks. So I think we should go do it.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Sound Bombing. I created this show for people who want to experience a radical, life-changing journey through the sounds of my diverse guests. I hope that each sound you hear on this show will strengthen your faith, encourage your dreams, and challenge you to awaken the greatness within you.
Drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We come to drop the bomb. Drop the bomb.
This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
Ladies and gentlemen, the star of the show,
Lamar Darnell Shields.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the time of the day it is, you're here with me in my studio, well, my virtual studio, because you're not actually with me. Welcome to my show. I am Dr. Lamar Darnell Shields, the creator of Sound Bombing. And my goal with this show is to introduce you to people with ideas that will help you unlock your full potential. Now, having a spouse you love and loves you back is one of the most rewarding experiences in life. I know because I had a spouse. You heard what I say, had a spouse. Hence, it is important to make your married life a top priority to building a strong marriage and living every moment with them to the fullest. But with so many responsibilities, and I know about having a whole bunch of responsibilities, it can be hard to prioritize your marriage. And before you know it, it's gone, it's over. You might even just lose sight of what's important in your life. So, how do you build a strong marriage? What makes a successful marriage? How do we keep couples together? Well, my next guest is going to help me unpack my own stuff. I mean, she's going to help us unpack our own stuff. And she's going to help us answer some of the questions that I have and some of the questions that you all sent to me. She is a New York Times best-selling author, is the star of The Empowered Wives on Amazon Prime, and host of her own podcast. She educates on 4 ways to help deep communication and how to fix a relationship without the other person's conscious effort. Her mission is to end world divorce. Now, that's interesting because some people are trying to end world hunger. Maybe she'll talk about both of those. She has appeared on the Today Show, Good Morning America, and The View. But bigger than that, she is on my show right now. So you Good Morning America people, you View people, she's with me right now. She has helped over 15,000 women fix their relationships, even the ones that feel hopeless, without their husbands even knowing what's going on. What miracle worker am I talking about? My friend, Laura Doyle. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Lamar. It's great to be here with you.
Hey, Laura, this is the time when it's getting cold outside and the holidays are coming and people need to be close to one another, but those bills are coming. We got all this political strife that's going on, inflation, gas. R. Kelly still making music and he's in jail. How's he doing it? All of that stuff. That's why we invited you here today, to keep us together. But before you give us your secrets with your magic wand, let my listeners know 2 things. Where are you calling in from? And we'd like to do a wellness check. How are you doing?
I'm calling from Newport Beach, California, beautiful Newport Beach. And I'm doing absolutely great. I feel good. I feel excited. I'm just so passionate about this mission that I'm on. And I'm excited to be on your show today to talk about giving everybody the tools that they need to have that wonderful relationship that you were just describing.
Yeah, so we all need the tools. There's a line that Jay-Z says when he got caught in a cheating situation or an entanglement, as we said, with Beyonce, and he got into it with her sister, and we didn't know what was going on. And he talked about many of us not having the tools. So that's why we sort of fall down this rabbit hole. And so I'm so glad that you're here today to share with us some of the tools. But before we get started, I want to read a quote from a guy named Calvin Roberts. He said he wrote the book called Marriage Ain't for Punks, a nonsense guide to building a lasting relationship. And he says, even though some marriages look like a hot mess, transparency, honesty, and downright fearlessness are the traits that make a great marriage. A great marriage is about refusing to allow pettiness to destroy the loving connection they share. These people are not weaklings. They are not quitters. They know that marriage ain't for punks. Hey, Laura, do you agree with that? Marriage ain't for punks, right?
This reminds me so much of that line from the musical Hamilton, where Alexander Hamilton is talking to George Washington, and Washington says, I know you have dreams of dying like a martyr. And he's like, yeah. And he goes, well, dying is easy. Living is harder. And it's kind of like divorce is easy, right? Staying married, that is the part that takes the courage and the fearlessness and honesty too. I think honesty. It's interesting though. I know for me, I was so confused about what those skills were to have a good marriage. My parents are divorced, right? So I was following.
Same here.
Right. Same here. Okay. Lots of us, right? So many of us. Divorce is so common now. And if that's the recipe you're following, well, I know I was following, unfortunately, my parents' recipe, and I was about to get the same results. In fact, T. Harv Eker says every master was once a disaster. And that's true for me. I remember being on the marriage counselor's gray couch, and we'd been there for over a year, and thinking this marriage is hopeless. It's never going to work. He's never going to change. We are too far apart. I'm either going to have to get divorced, or I'm going to spend the rest of my life in a loveless marriage. And so I decided
I thought you was going to stay in jail. Like I'm about to take him out. I've seen so many shows. I was like, is she about to go there? I'm about to take him out. I'm going to end up on the E channel, HLN. I'm so glad.
Me and R. Kelly, we're going to be, if they're making music in prison or something. Yeah. No. So it was bad. It was bad. And
so why do we let it get there before you go a little deep? Why do we let it get so far that it's difficult for many of us, not hopeless, to then come back? Because I too remember sitting on those couches and wondering, how could we bring this thing back?
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of times, like I know for me, I was reading all the marriage books, and I was doing what they said. And I remember I also have to admit that I started out my marriage thinking, well, he is great, but I'm going to just help him do a few things better. I'm going to just help him be a little more ambitious and a little tidier, and also more romantic. I'm going to show him how to be more romantic. So as I was trying to help improve my husband, he was getting more and more distant. He didn't want to spend any time with me. He was more interested in watching reruns on TV than he was in even making love to me. So I knew there was something wrong with him. And everybody knows that if you can't even have a conversation without having a fight, which is where we were, that you have to go to marriage counseling. Right?
And those must have been some serious reruns. If he's no one intimacy, please don't even tell me the TV shows. I don't want their ratings to go up right now.
No.
For him to watch some reruns and then say,
I don't think these were very compelling reruns. This was a long time ago too. So it's like over 20 years ago. But he I think in his defense, I had become kind of a prickly porcupine of a wife, but I thought I was doing all the things that you should do to make your marriage better. Like, I would explain to him that I had a deep concern about his lack of affection. Right. And I remember even saying to him, the average couple has sex 2.5 times per week. And we haven't done it in 2 weeks. So I think we should go do it. And
I like how you just said that we should go do it. Like we right now.
Do it. Right now. I thought he was going to jump off the couch and just sweep me into the bedroom. That never happened, Dr. Lamar. So anyway, so I was apparently not doing some things correctly, but I brought him to marriage counseling thinking that the counselor could finally fix him, and then I could have the great marriage that I'd always dreamed I would have, because that was how I thought it worked. And of course, we both know that's not how it worked. So I was on her couch and I thought, this is hopeless. I'm going to get divorced. And then there was this one big problem, and that is that I was too embarrassed to get divorced. I felt like there was going to be a loss of status. And also I had seen my parents go through their terrible divorce. And so I thought, okay, as a last ditch effort, I'm going to ask women who have been married for at least 15 years and they have happy marriages. I'm going to ask them for their secrets. And I did that. And they said some crazy things. And
All
I
right,
thought,
now you got to share. You got to share some of those secrets.
Cray. I'm going to share. I'm going to tell you all the things. But I thought, okay, I'm going to just experiment with them and my marriage, because I got nothing to lose here. Because it's already, we're lost. And I remember I was doing some of the things they said for not even that long. And one day I came home and my husband's face lit up as soon as he saw me. And I thought, this is working. Something's working here, because that had been gone. We'd been having either wall-to-wall hostility, or we had Cold Wars where there was no talking for days. And so I thought, okay, I'm onto something here. And I got really excited and hopeful that now I was going to finally be able to have the kind of marriage I wanted to have, because I knew what to do. And I could see how much power I had to bring a different response from my husband. And so I thought, well, this is great. And we're not going to have those big fights in the car anymore. And then a few days later, we had a big fight in the car again. So, and I was saying these horrible things, and he was saying horrible things, and I knew I was going to regret it later. And I just had this idea, like, okay, maybe since I know what to do now, I'm going to try to get some of my friends that are complaining about their marriages. I'm going to get them to do this with me. And then maybe if we all do it together, we have this structure and support, then we'll be able to, it'll make it stick for me. That was mainly, I was just trying to save my own marriage. That's all I was trying to do. And that worked. We had 5 of us in my living room, and we were seeing miracles. They would say like, oh, my husband won the sales contest at work. He took me on the most romantic getaway of our lives. That was one. And this other woman said, this isn't going to sound like a miracle to you guys, but it is. We've been arguing for months about, I wanted him to paint the family room. He got up and painted the family room and he did it with a smile. He was excited to do it. She's like, it's a miracle. So we knew we were onto something. And somebody said, can you write down what we're doing for my cousin in Florida? Because we're in California. And I said, sure, I'll do that. And I did. I wrote it down, and that became my first book, which became a immediate New York Times bestselling book. And, it was published in 19 languages in 30 countries. It started a worldwide movement of women who practice the 6 intimacy skills, which are the practices that I gleaned from these who would have thought, right, that happily married women would know the secrets.
So before you get into the 6 skills, were the men in these sessions as well, or was it the women sharing?
No, just us.
So why were the men not a part of the sessions, you felt?
I'll tell you. And this was shocking, because I'm a feminist, well-educated, just so you know. Women are the keepers of the relationship, in my experience. It was true in my marriage. I noticed it with all the women in my little original group. And now that I've helped tens of thousands of women fix their marriages and feel desired and taken care of and special again in their relationships, we really see women are the keepers of the relationship. And what's crazy,
now explain that concept.
Feel like it, yeah.
So explain the concept. The women are the keepers of the relationship.
So I've asked thousands of men. I did some research on this. I've asked them, "Oh, how important is it to you that your wife is happy?" And you had a relationship. You spoke about it early on. So let me just ask you, how important was it to you that she was happy?
Very important.
Very important. Okay. So I've asked thousands of men this question, and they all say the same thing. They say it's the most important thing. It's very important. In the United Kingdom, they say it's imperative, right? So all over the world, men care deeply about their wives' happiness. Happy wife, happy life. It's not just an expression, right? It really is. There's some truth to it. And so, but I didn't feel this way. I thought, well, my husband doesn't care about my happiness at all. I can't even get him to take out the trash. I can't even get him to make love to me. Clearly he doesn't care. But what I didn't realize is that I was doing things that were causing him to be defensive. I was showing up with a lot of disrespect, and I didn't realize I was doing that. But when I just made a few little tweaks, and I want to show everybody exactly what I did so that they can do it too today. I'm going to have them write it down and everything else, give you the formulas. Oh my gosh, my husband showed up like my hero, like the man who had wooed me came back. And then I got the kind of marriage that I have now, which is where I'll be walking down the hall and he just grabs me at the waist and pulls me in, and he makes up little songs about how much he loves me almost every day. So this is this is how you save your marriage, is you fix it by making it amazing again, not by like, okay, we just managed to not get divorced and we're living here like awkward roommates or whatever. So it's exciting. And so once I realized this, I'm like, I got to get this into the hands of every woman, because why is it not taught in schools? Why, how is this that I had to take differential equations, but I never learned these 6 intimacy skills? So I'm very passionate about that.
All right. So we're going to get to the 6 intimacy skills. I want to go back to the conversation of happiness. I'm thinking about a very popular couple, Will and Jada, the Smith family. Right. And before the Chris Rock situation, many of us have been watching this family being very transparent, and they go through their challenges and ups and downs. But I remember Will Smith and Jada, Will giving a conversation via some social media platform or maybe an interview. And he said to Jada that he was not responsible for her happiness. And he said when he first said that, it became an argument. And then he said it again, maybe some months or weeks, maybe a year later. And Jada finally got what he was attempting to say when he says, I am not responsible for your happiness. Do you agree with that? Because you asked me a question about, do you want your significant other, your partner to be happy? But, in his statement, he says, I'm not responsible for your happiness.
I love that you brought this up. It's so fascinating to me because, so first of all, yeah, I agree. I agree with Will. And in our situation, what I was doing, and I really thought this was the right thing to do, and I did see my parents doing this, and it didn't work for them, but was that when I was disappointed because he wasn't being as attentive or wasn't helping out as much, or didn't want to spend time with me, I thought, well, I've got to show him that I'm unhappy about this. I'm gonna punish him by being miserable and becoming a martyr. And that's what I did. And the more miserable I became, of course, the less successful he felt about making his wife happy. And the less happy I was too. So lose. So it turns out, and we're just kind of sliding right into these intimacy skills here, which, so the very first one is I had to make myself happy, because it turns out only happy people have happy relationships. Drop the mic right there, really,
boom,
because
I agree.
Boom. And so what I did was, and for me, everything had to be practical, because I'd been reading all these books and they'd be like, oh, you got to love yourself. And I thought, what does that mean? I'm like, do I have to hug myself? Or I didn't know if I was doing it or not. So for me, I made it real practical. I made a list of 20 things that bring me joy, things that make me frivolous fun, just happy things like, I love to play volleyball, right? So, and I wasn't playing at that time. And I love going to the sushi bar and having some sushi, or I love playing little word games on my phone. And so, I made this list of 20 things. And then for me, in order to be happy, I had to do at least 3 of them a day. And I couldn't weasel out of them, right? I couldn't be like, oh, well, today I'm too busy. I gotta, I got work, and we got to pay the bills, or right. And that's kind of what I had been doing before. I'd forgotten who I was. And I think a lot of women do that. I have this inner girl of fun and light, and I'm way over 12 years old, but I like that phrase because I think every woman has that just want to have fun girl in her. And we forget sometimes that that's maybe who our husbands fell in love with, right? We were smiling and singing and dancing and laughing when we fell in love. And then we get serious and we get kind of uptight, and he doesn't feel successful making us happy. And that feels bad because, as you just validated, it's one of his most important jobs, is he feels like to make me happy. So when we go back to Jada and Will, yeah, both are true. My husband really wants to make me happy, and it's not his responsibility. It's my responsibility And then as soon as I do make myself happy, oh my gosh, that guy cannot wait to pile on and try to make me even happier. So that's kind of a nice surprise dynamic that I didn't see before.
So that's one. One is to make yourself happy.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and hear the other 5.
All right. Well, the second one was, it turns out that I was very controlling. I didn't realize fish never know they're in the ocean. They're like, what ocean? I don't see this here. And I did not realize that all control is based in fear. If you're not afraid, you don't have to tell somebody like, hey, a 2-seater car is not going to be practical for a family of 4, or you don't have to say, hey, don't forget to pay those property taxes or we'll have a late fee, or, a late fee is what they charge you when you don't pay on time, and all these, annoying things that I used to say. And so the second skill is about relinquishing control. And again, has to be very practical, right? So I'll tell you a little story about one of my students who her marriage was in trouble. They'd been sleeping in separate beds for about 6 months. And they were a blended family with stepkids, two from each. And so they'd already both been through a divorce. And her name's Kathy Murray, and she was the CFO of a private school, big private school. So she's very successful at work about managing finances. And she was trying to help her husband manage finances at home. And that wasn't going well, right? She knew that he knew that she didn't really trust him to do things correctly, the right way. And so he came to her right after she had read my book. And he said, oh, you got to tell me what you want me to do about the cell phone plan. We got to make a decision. You got to tell me. And she said to him, she used this cheap phrase. She goes, oh, Doug, whatever you think. And he just looked at her like, what just happened to my wife? And he said, no, you got to tell me, because he was trained. He knew he was going to get in trouble if he didn't do it right. And she said, whatever you think, I trust you this time. She added, I trust you. And so he went away and made the cell phone decision. And she was afraid he was going to make a bad decision, but he didn't. He did fine. And then he came to her that night and he put his hand on her shoulder and said, you were so nice today. And tears just ran down her cheeks. They slept in the same bed that very night. And that was the beginning of them reconciling, to the point where she still gets tears in her eyes to this day about that. And that was many years ago, because she would have thrown out the love of her life if she hadn't learned a few cheap phrases to use to help her relinquish that inappropriate control. And that is the second skill. And so, anybody who's listening and wants to employ this stuff, write down that cheat phrase. It's whatever you think, just to indicate that you think he's competent and capable. You trust his thinking, which is kind of why you chose him and married him in the first place. And maybe you forgot, maybe he exercised his right to be wrong a few times. And you saw that and you got scared like I did. That's exactly what I did. And so I was always offering helpful advice. And I didn't realize that helpful in wife language is critical in husband language. But it is.
All right. Number 3.
All right. So number 3 is about a concept that I thought for sure I knew all about, because I was raised knowing that this is something you should always give your husband. But I didn't really understand what it looked like. And it's respect, right? So we're all taught, you gotta respect your husband. Men need respect. That's the most important thing to them. And I thought, well, I respect him, except for the way he drives and the way he dresses, and he doesn't eat that well. So I really had no concept of what respect looked like. And I didn't know. And so I learned, that's one of the things I learned from these wise women that I interviewed, some things about what that really looked like. And I learned that respect is actually the best aphrodisiac on the planet for men. And so I'll give you an example of what it looks like. So one of the things that, and I'm still not perfect at this, and I've been practicing a long time, so I don't know if you ever get to be perfect with these intimacy skills, but we were at dinner. He'd take me to a really nice restaurant on a Saturday night. So the place was buzzing, right? The waiters are flying by and the bar's laughing over there, and we're having just a real nice time. And then he's talking about his work. And then I ask a question about one of his clients. And then all of a sudden, it's like the music stops, the laughter stops, the waiters stop. He gets this look on his face like, And then I think, and I'm not ready to be accountable yet. So I go, was that disrespectful? And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, oh. And then I pause for a moment and I go, oh, I apologize for being disrespectful when I asked that question about your client, which was really meant to, it wasn't just a question, right? It was like, don't you think that you should give preferential treatment to this client so that I'm telling him how to run his business. He'd had his business for over 20 years. He didn't really need my help running his business. And I don't really want the responsibility of helping him run his business, right? I want to be his wife and lover, not his smother mother. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so as soon as I apologized for being disrespectful, he got, he looked relaxed again. And the waiter started and the music went back and the people were laughing at the bar and our good time was back. And so it was really a save because that night could have just gone completely south. It could have gone into a Cold War where we're just, awkward and tense, if not outright bickering for that whole night, maybe into the next day.
So, but how did you feel in that moment? When you paused for a second, you felt the energy shift, you felt the room slow down. How did you feel in that moment? And then how did you pull yourself back up to then respond the way that you did? Because again, as you said, these skills are learned over a long period of time. And quite often, many of us in these relationships, we get caught up in this battle where we know what we said was inappropriate, but we still stand firm and then decide just to go down fighting.
Yeah. It's a great question. And you're right to ask that because that situation actually reflects years of practicing this skill of cleaning up my side of the street when I have been disrespectful and knowing what it looks like, really tuning in like, ooh, I just did that thing that doesn't really feel good to me. It feels a little dirty and hairy. And I know now that it costs me intimacy with my husband and I'm not willing. There's no, the price of admission was too high. I wasn't willing to pay to sacrifice that intimacy that night.
I'm loving all your metaphors. The fish don't know they're in the ocean. The price of intimacy. The price was too high. I had to clean my side of the street. I'm loving all these cliches.
Thanks, Dr. Lamar. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think when I first thought about being respectful, I misunderstood. I thought it was something you give to like your boss. You have to be respectful, your teachers, maybe your parents. And today I know I want to be respectful because it feels more dignified. When I heard myself in the old days, I was a rager, unfortunately. I would just rip him up one side and down the other. And not just him, sales clerks, bank tellers, customer service people, my sister. So I'm not proud to say any of that, but I'm just so grateful to have the ability, the wherewithal. I gave myself little practical steps, right? And this is back to that thing where I had the support of the group. That was how in that moment, I remember early on being disrespectful to my husband and thinking, wow, those other women in my living room, they're counting on me to do some of these things that I'm telling them to do, right? That I'm inviting them to be more respectful. I better suck it up right now and apologize, even though it can feel, like sawdust in your mouth at first, but then after a while, it feels like honey in your mouth.
I love that. What's number 4?
Oh yeah. Okay. So number 4 is about, I call it receiving graciously. And I get people say, well, that sounds so old fashioned. And it's interesting because
I love that because there's this concept that I've been focusing on called gracious listening. And so when you say receiving graciously, is that what you said? Receiving graciously?
Exactly.
So it reminds me of gracious listening as being in the space where you're holding space for those individuals. Yeah. But go ahead with number 4.
Yeah. Wow. That's so good for intimacy. Also, I love that gracious listening. So I think one of the things I also was terrible about in my early marriage was my husband we'd wake up in the morning and say, oh, you're so beautiful, and I go, oh, no, don't look at me like I'm a mess, and I would reject that compliment. Or he would buy me flowers And I would say, oh gosh, these are so expensive and they die so quickly. Like maybe I don't think we can afford these flowers. I was rejecting the gifts and the compliments. Or, I remember even one time we moved and I was carrying this heavy box up the flight of stairs kind of thing. And he would have done it. He was like, why are you doing that? I would do that for you. And so, or even apologies, I would just say, oh, that's okay. That's all right. I was rejecting where I could have been receiving a lot of things that were intended to make my load lighter, or to delight me, to make me smile. And so I was a poor receiver.
And that's such a human trait of individuals. I talk a lot about self-care in the work that I do, because people in my profession, education and a nonprofit, for-profit, they're sort of stressed out with a lot of different things. And I even talk about how we don't even know how to receive a compliment. I say to you, Laura, you look so great. You're like, this old sweater, this jacket, this brooch that I'm wearing, this necklace, we don't even know how to receive. And I'm constantly telling people, in order for me to complete my task as a giver, there has to be a receiver. In order for you to complete your task, there has to be a giver in order for you to receive. So quite often, many of us don't know how to handle a compliment. And I'm so glad that you talked about this being, when you talk about the women, because I typically see it more amongst women. I don't really see it too often with guys. Well, maybe we don't compliment each other that way, but to hear you say you didn't even know how to receive it, like even carrying a bag, because I think what happens now, and you talk about, I'm educated, I'm a feminist. I think what happens is these signals get crossed a lot of times. And so should I pull your chair out? Should I not pull your chair out? Should I hold the door? Should I not hold the door? Should I lift you up? Should I not lift you up? Should I, do these certain things? And because of the roles are starting to shift in society, I had the same conversation with my children about dress as a young person and as an adult. I think sometimes we do get confused, but I do agree with you wholeheartedly. Many of us and many of the women I've come across quite often don't know how to receive, or sometimes it gets caught up in translation that if I'm giving you a compliment, there's some level of intimacy, there's some other things. And it's like, no, I'm just giving you a compliment. There's nothing else that
Absolutely.
I'm trying to do at all. So I like what you called it gracious receiving. Was that correct?
Yeah. Receiving. I say receiving graciously,
receiving
but
graciously.
Gracious receiving. It works also. Yeah. Either one.
Because it takes a level of grace to say, I appreciate it. Thank you.
That's
or
right.
Sometimes I always say I'm just a reflection of you, to then share my light. I've been doing that a lot. Like we say, you look so, you look great today. I'm like, I'm just a reflection of you because I want to share my light, because if I'm complimenting you, quite often we don't even say it back. That's another thing. Like I will give a compliment and then it's not reciprocal. And quite often, sometimes I think we should share that light. I'm a reflection of you. Thank you. I appreciate it. You look nice too. I rarely hear that as well, Laura, as well in the conversation amongst people.
Interesting, because I feel like that's one of the ways that I think sometimes women will deflect. So it's interesting. So I think for me, it was vital for me to learn to just receive the compliment without reciprocating, because just like gifts, right? Like I remember this. I remember joking with my husband one time. It was Christmas, and I'd gotten him a bunch of little gifts, and he and I started putting them under the tree. He said, how many gifts did you get me? And I was like, oh, John, it doesn't matter how many gifts, I got you or you got me. He's like, I said, as long as they cost the same, right? It was, it was a joke, but it's like, in some ways, and one of the things that I'll say to women on Valentine's Day is, hey, one of the best gifts you could give your husband is just to be a good receiver. And that might mean not getting him anything, but just being willing to be delighted, to just smile. And whether, it's something you always wanted, or you can just receive maybe the thoughtfulness of that he thought of you as somebody he wanted to shower with a gift on that day. So sometimes the reciprocating can be, I especially see it with women, like, oh, cute shoes. Oh, thanks. I was just thinking, I love your boots, or what,
So I see that amongst women. I definitely see that.
And so
between women rather. So,
right. Yeah. And so what I'm recommending, and what was so important for me, just to experiment with it, at least, is just receiving gifts, help, apologies, special treatment, all of that with just by simply saying thank you and smiling
I
and
love
nothing
that.
further. And it's actually, it can feel very awkward. And I'll tell you, my one of my heroes of receiving is she's the host, Kat Deely of So You Think You Can Dance. And I remember one time she came out on the stage and she looked all beautiful and glistening like she does. And the judges said to her, "Oh, Kat, you look so beautiful." And she just smiled and she, she didn't respond right away. She just smiled and she said, "Thank you." She just really took it in. And then they said, "Oh, and Kat, congratulations on your Emmy nomination." And she again just kind of paused and smiled. She said, "Thank you." And those judges, they had also been nominated for an Emmy, but she could have said, "Oh, and congratulations to you
Yeah.
on your Emmy." She didn't do that. And I just love that she just stood under that white hot spotlight and took all the praise. And I think it takes something to do that. I think it takes some confidence, self-confidence to do that. And I think sometimes when we're deflecting a compliment like that, it's because we don't feel deserving of it. And it's really kind of a shortcut for becoming more confident to practice this gracious receiving.
I love that. I never thought about it that way. The deflecting is because we really don't know how to receive a compliment. Number 5.
Number 5 is vulnerability. And this is
Brene Brown, the queen of vulnerability. I love.
no, Laura Doyle, queen of vulnerability.
Let me stand correct. Laura Doyle with the capital
No,
D, the
I'm
queen
teasing.
of vulnerability.
Where's my humility today? I don't know. No, actually, and Brene, that TED Talk she did is a fantastic example of vulnerability. We all connected with her so big because she was so vulnerable, right? And that's the thing, vulnerability is so attractive. It does draw you in. It's a sort of a sacred trust. It's saying, "I trust you to hold me in safe hands. Like, you're not going to say anything disparaging. You're not going to hurt me because I'm showing up undefended." And I'll give you an example. I know for me, when we were dating, I remember one time I found out my check I was expecting was going to be delayed. And I was so scared I was going to run out of money. And I was crying in front of my husband. It's just my boyfriend at the time, or fiance maybe. And he just flew across the room to like wrap his arms around me and say, "Hey, it's going to be okay. Everything's fine. And I got you." And was just dry my, I felt like the most important person in the whole world to him in that moment. And then fast forward, we're married. And once again, I'm worried we're going to run out of money because that was kind of my jam early on. I had a not so productive mantra going on about that early on. But this time, instead of taking a vulnerable approach, I just grabbed the calculator and I did the math and I figured out which bills we were going to juggle and then which ones we're going to pay. And I said, "Hey, don't take anything out of the ATM until payday because this is what we're doing." And he was like barely listening to me. He was like, "Okay." I was not the most important person in the world to him in that moment. I was like, "Okay, yeah, all right, you got that handled. I'm going to go do something else." And now I've been married for 33 years, so I'm not falling apart about running out of money anymore. But I still appreciate that when I go to my husband and say, "Hey, I've got this problem, and I'd love to borrow your brain on it because I'm not sure what to do." Or it could even be somebody, my mother's getting on my very last nerve or whatever it is, right? And I just need that. I need some support. I don't need to be stuck in the bottom of a well in order to really just need that. I call it supervision and encouragement from my husband. And when I show up with that vulnerability and that, I'm not sure what to do. He just still to this day, then I become the most important person in the world again. And he is so eager to soothe me, to take care of me, to make sure to be my hero. I can really trigger his hero gene that way.
Yeah, that's a word that I'm embracing even more. I wish when I was married that's something that could have done more. I did it in my work more so than in my own home. I think I did it more with my children, but not with my wife. I did it more with the young people and teachers educators and leaders that I was working with, but I didn't do it here enough. So when to hear you say your number 5 is vulnerability, and that's why I was talking about Brene Brown, because it really made me think about this woman who is on this stage talking to millions of people, just a quarter of the people that I get a chance to talk to, and we all hold her like we hold you, and this high esteem because you New York bestseller and things of that nature. But to hear you, put everything right here, it's like you can't attack me. I think about when Kevin Hart was being interviewed by Oprah Winfrey on Super Soul Sunday. And Kevin Hart was like, I know you're going to call me black. You can call me dark. You can call me short. You can call me all these things. I said, he started naming all the things. And then he said, once you say all those things, then as a comedian, I'm going to come after you because there's nothing that you can say that's going to hurt me. And so that's that vulnerability, bringing your whole self to a relationship and then just because that's the person that we typically have fallen in love with when you didn't have the money, when the bills were this, when you were doing those certain things. And you're still working through a lot of that stuff. And so that concept of vulnerability really, really hit me. Let's talk about number 6. Should I have a drum roll?
Maybe. Yeah. And, I skipped something on number 2. I want to go back to it. But anyway, okay. First we'll do number 6, which is
number 6.
Number 6 is, it's, I'll start by saying that when I when we were struggling with money, because remember, that was my jam. That was my little song that I like to sing. One of the things I used to do was complain to my husband. I didn't start out as a complaint. I would say, hey, maybe you could ask for a raise, or maybe you could get a better job, or maybe you could try to make more money. And of course, what he heard was, you don't make enough money. And rightly so, right? So I had this, I'll call it a spouse fulfilling prophecy. You don't.
Yeah, I just felt that. I felt that when you said that as a man, as someone who's been there, when we are going back to roles, when society says we are supposed to be the breadwinner, we're supposed to be the head, we're supposed to do, going back to our parents, what we observe from our parents, because we learn our first relationships from the people that are closest to us. So again, in his mind, he's hearing something else.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, I think I was saying it though. I mean, if we look back, let's read the transcript, maybe you could make more money.
Let's go back and pull out the tape.
yeah, I was outright. It was a criticism. And I wasn't so aware that it was a criticism, but I think I felt justified in a way.
So why did you feel justified? Let's park right there. Why did you feel justified that you could say that and then be okay?
That's I cannot answer that question. It is not justified. So, but I think I felt it at the time. And I think if we go back to this idea that you copy your parents, I remember my mom saying the same thing to my dad.
It's almost like I deserve this. I deserve better.
I deserve.
So you need to give it to me.
Yeah. I was. What's that word? I had expectation. Entitlement. Thank you. I was entitled. I'm entitled to this. So entitled to more than you're making. Right? It's not attractive at all. It's repulsive. And I'm such a good manifester that when I had this mantra, my husband stopped working. He wasn't making any money at all. That's just how good I am at making things happen because I say that they're going to happen. Right. And so, not just me, all of us are such good manifestors like this. And so, I actually heard from Lee Miltier, I heard the concept of, it was about, they called it autosuggestion back in the day, I guess. This is really old tape I heard. And she was talking about how she taught a class on autosuggestion where she taught people how to say to themselves, I ran a marathon or I have a successful business. And that wasn't so yet, but they were saying it to themselves to begin to manifest that. And then she talked about this one student who came to the class and realized that she had been auto-suggesting to her husband that he lost his temper a lot. And she thought, I'm going to start auto-suggesting. It's not auto-suggesting anymore. It's like someone else suggesting, really. So she thought, I'm going to just change that up. So she went home. She waited for her husband to lose his temper, and she didn't have to wait very long. And then she said to him, that's not like you to lose your temper. And he just looked at her funny, like, what are you talking about? But he didn't argue with her, but their 12-year-old son said, yes, it is, Mom. He always loses his temper. Because what had he been listening to but her saying, you always lose your temper. But she thought, I'm going to keep doing this. Like, I got nothing to lose. I'm going to keep saying it's not like you. And so she did that. And not too long after, they were at a restaurant and the service was slow. And the husband started to fume. He's like, I've got mind to call the waitress or the manager over here and tell him how long we've been waiting. And then he stopped himself and he turned to her and he said, that's not like me to lose my temper, is it? And she just nearly fell off of the chair because she couldn't believe he had taken this on. But it was like we're all kind of looking at, especially our spouses, I think, and getting a reflection back that we take on about ourselves. So I heard this story and I thought, okay, I'm going to change up my spouse fulfilling prophecy to you don't make enough money to you've always been a good provider. You've always been a good provider. And then just for fun, I thought I'm going to start calling him Mr. Moneybags. So I did that. And so around that time, my husband started his own company. He had never done that before. And it was right in his wheelhouse. It was a video company. And it was very successful. It was more successful than he'd been with any of his previous jobs. And, you get checks in the mail and stuff. And I'd say, oh, Mr. Moneybags, you got a check in the mail or whatever. And I still call him Mr. Moneybags. Anyway, all that to say, the experience that I was having completely changed when I changed what I was focused on. And so that's what this is. It's what you focus on increases exercise about your spouse. And I picked my husband because I thought he was smart and funny and handsome and musical. And I forgot all about that and thought, oh, he's kind of a slob and he doesn't make very much money and whatever. I had focused on these things that were painful. And by focusing on the things that really serve me better, the things that I want to be experiencing, my husband is a great provider. That doesn't feel like a stretch at all. He's a fantastic provider. So that's I call it a gratitude skill. This is under, and each of these skills, I'm just skimming the bare surface and not really giving out the formulas and the cheat phrases like I like to have every woman have. But I want to at least show you that there are some skills and they're not like the ones that you read about everywhere, where it says, confront your husband about his whatever, right? Like that never worked. There's on my podcast, I give out the worst relationship advice of the week award almost every week because so much of what we read is not effective. And so much of the marriage counseling, so many of my students arrive and have their miracle in their marriages after they've been to marriage counseling and either it didn't work or it got worse. So it's a big part of what I want to do.
I think what you provided, those 6 strategies are easy strategies that people can get. So my question after listening to the strategies, the success strategies, and I know these are written for women, where does the accountability for the husband, where is his role in this situation that's taking place?
All right. I'll give you an example of that. So one of my students, Isabella, was doing, so another part of the gratitude skill is I invite the students to experiment with giving 3 gratitudes a day to their husbands. All right. And I remember Isabella was upset about this assignment. She's like, I don't see why I should stroke his ego and nobody's thanking me. And plus I do everything around the house. She was not really having it, but she just decided, she agreed she would experiment for the week to give 3 gratitudes a day. And so she thanked him for watching the baby while she went to exercise. And she thanked him for taking out the trash. She thanked him for working to support the family, even though she works too. And she said, by the second day, they were sitting down at dinner. He said, you've really taught me we need to appreciate each other more. And I wanted to thank you for making dinner. And she also nearly fell out of her chair, right? So we have a lot of people falling out of their chairs because we have a lot of power to, when you expect the best from somebody and you focus on their best, that tends to be the outcome that you get. And if you think back to why you chose your husband from the wife's perspective, right? Why did you choose him? Because he was a great guy. He was a wonderful man. And that man is still in him. And if you decide to focus on that, but even your words, your thoughts, all of it are going to create that experience that you want to have instead of the one that you don't want to have. And maybe there's been a lot of damage, like there was in my marriage, right? There was a ton of hurt, and we were right there on the brink of divorce. And so it can take a little while for the new ways to be trusted. But I think that it's just remarkable, the stories I hear again and again. I had one husband was on my podcast, husband of a student recently, who was 18 months sober. And he said, I give all the credit to my wife. Before this, I thought we were going to get divorced, and what did it matter anyway? He goes, but now I feel like I'm the leader in my home, and they're my two boys, my wife are looking up to me, and I want to be the role model that they are expecting. He was 18 months sober and lost 80 pounds. It was just like a different man, right? So when you say, where's the accountability? I just am dumbstruck by the changes, the transformation we see in the husband when the wife learns these skills and uses them in her marriage.
Yeah, I love those stories. Let's talk about counseling. Let's talk about some of the mistakes that people make when they're choosing a marriage counselor. And then let's talk about, let's talk about how we should go about choosing a marriage counselor. So share some of the lessons that you've learned from some of your past clients who've actually gone to a marriage counselor and things didn't go the way they wanted to go.
You mean the marriage counselors?
The marriage counselors. Yes, I like that.
I'm feeling wicked today. Well, so I'll use my own story, but I have to say, I've seen it thousands and thousands of times now with all my students over the last 20 years. But I went to marriage counseling to fix him. I was just going to stand by while she was going to fix him. And then I would finally be happy, right? So where's the accountability on my part there? It wasn't there. That's one problem. But I think another, there's so many problems with marriage counseling. I think another aspect of it that was a reason we would get in a fight.
So is that the counseling issue now? Is that the counseling issue?
That's on me. That's on me. That's on me. You're right. But I also think it's not uncommon because I think it's easy to hide out in marriage counseling and just point your finger and shame and blame instead of just working on it. It turns out one of the things I've learned from doing all these intimacy skills all these years is there's no such thing as working on a marriage. There's no such thing. There's just working on yourself. And then he responds to you so much better, so much differently. And so I think in some ways, two people sitting on a couch. I think another thing that went wrong for us, and I see this very commonly also, is you're invited to talk about your problems at marriage counseling, right? So you're putting more focus and emphasis on the problems, and what you focus on increases. So now we've got bigger problems than we did before even when we went to marriage counseling. I remember sitting on that couch and telling the counselor in front, he was a stranger, in front of my husband, everything that was wrong with him. So you talk about disrespect. I had nothing but complaints about the man that I promised to love above all others when I went to marriage counseling. So again, that's on me. But I think that there is a little bit of a, I think we've all been taught, when your marriage is struggling, you should go to marriage counseling. And I don't think we're taught the other part, which is so that you can be accountable for your side of the street. And you can look at how you might have been contributing to this breakdown. And so that you can regain your dignity and your sense of fun and your happiness. Those aren't things that I commonly hear about going on in marriage counseling. I'm not saying they're bad people. I think they certainly mean well. And I know there's good ones out there for sure. But I just think maybe the structure is not as beneficial as I feel like a more modern approach is coaching, relationship coaching for a single person in the relationship, not, a married single person in the relationship, not for the couple, because it's really not about the between you. It's how do you want to show up? How do you want to, how do you want to show up really is the $1 million question.
So what's the one question you should never ask a man? You're learning from all these women that you sit down with. What's the one question you say you should never ask?
All right. Well, question? as I say it, I want to just see your head nod or shake if this resonates with you. So Dr. Lamar, how did you feel about that? What were your feelings?
I was hurt.
Okay. All right. Is that a question that you want your wife to be like, hey, when you were a little kid and your dad yelled at you, how did you feel about that? Or so for me, what I thought was the way to get to intimacy with my husband was I was going to be his counselor. I was going to, get to the root of some of his childhood issues by asking him how he felt about things. And I would ask him how he felt, and he would just say, hungry, I'm hungry. Or one time he said, how did you feel? And he's like, with my hands, feelings with my hands. So it wasn't something he was interested to talk about. And this is, I have since come to appreciate that's a more feminine approach. Like, as the female in the relationship, I'm the one with the emotional brilliance. And this is something I'm excited to tell women, right? You have the emotional brilliance. Your relationship depends on that. Your husband depends on that. The world depends on you having this ability to know how you feel and express that. But it's, anytime I'm turning to my husband on that, it's like I'm off my paper, I'd call it, which is where all my decisions are, right? This is like when you're a little kid in school, they say, keep your eyes on your own paper. And that's where, when I decide to go to bed and my attitude and what I decide to eat that day, that's all my decisions there. And he's got his own paper, and me trying to say, well, how did you feel? I'm off of my paper and nothing good can happen. Nothing really good can happen when I'm off my paper, because this is the only thing I have control over, is my paper. And when I take care of what's on my paper and show up the way I want to show up with, if I show up with kindness and dignity and respect and vulnerability and gratitude, oh my gosh, everything on his paper just straightens itself out. He responds to me so well, and I get a totally better experience. So I think just being able to stay on my paper would mean leaving out this question, how do you feel to my husband?
Speaking of feelings, at what point do you feel that a couple should just walk away and say, we've made every attempt, we've asked all the questions, we've had all the dialogue, but there's nothing there? How do we walk away? And then not only at what point do you walk away, but how do we walk away?
Yeah, it's a great question. What a painful question, right? And I remember being there. I remember thinking, I'm going to walk away, and not really wanting to do that deep down, but not seeing another possibility. And what I have learned from helping, tens of thousands of women fix their marriages is that they're all fixable. They are all fixable. And it sounds crazy, because I remember when I first started, I said, well, that's all fixable unless there's physical abuse or chronic cheating, or if there's an addiction, then that's those you got to walk away. And I became like the expert on somebody else's life, right? On somebody else's marriage. Like, I'm going to tell you when you got to give it up. But women didn't listen. Women came and said, hey, I saw you on the Today Show or Good Morning America or whatever, and I want to do this in my marriage. Now, my husband's an alcoholic, but I'm not going to leave. I've got 4 kids. I'm not going to break up their home. So I want to use these skills in that situation. And then, I've been schooled. They created incredible transformations that I didn't see a possibility for until they showed me what was possible. So for me, this is a big part of why I'm on a mission to end world divorce, is because I think there are so many terrible myths about when you should end a marriage and when you have to end a marriage, and why this one is hopeless and you've got to get out and you're not safe. And I think even, our girlfriends over margaritas will say, you deserve better. You should leave. And they want to protect us. They mean well. Mm-hmm. And that's not what you need when you're trying to keep your family together. And what an honorable thing to keep your family together. I don't know that I can think of anything that I think is more important than being able to keep your family together. And so I know for me, it's been the best self-improvement program I've ever undertaken to try to fix my marriage. I became a better Laura. I think I became the best Laura that I can be by just using the dojo of my marriage, right? Like the ballet bar mirror of seeing his reflection of me gave me everything I needed to go through that door that was marked accountability, self-awareness, self-control, It's like I'm a New York Times bestseller. I have 2 million downloads on my podcast. I have an international relationship coaching company. The thing I'm most proud of in the whole world is that I have the marriage I always dreamed I would have when I stood at the altar and said, I do.
Well, that is a great way to end this part of the show. It's been an honor hanging out with you, but you cannot leave because the second part of the show is called the Super Bomb Questions. And these questions are going to be rapid fire. So are you ready, Miss Laura? Are you ready?
Ready.
All right. So here we go. What's your favorite word?
Busted. You are so busted. I am so busted right now.
What's your favorite quote or Bible verse or lyric to a song?
It's from Ambrose Redmoon. He said, courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else is more important. Like
what's
fixing
your superpower?
Your marriage.
Like fixing. What's your superpower?
My superpower is being able to help women fix their marriages without their husband's conscious effort, even if it seems completely hopeless.
What moves you to tears of joy?
Hearing about a marriage getting fixed, hearing about him coming back, hearing about him giving up the other woman, telling her he loves her. He's always loved her. She's always been the one. Or even just hearing about him holding her hand in the car for the first time in 10 years.
What moves you to tears of sorrow?
When I lost my brother, when my brother died.
Sorry to hear that. What do you wish you had more time to do?
I wish I had more time to so many things. I'm working on redoing the training in my modules right now, and I'm passionate. I'm joyful doing it, and it's taking a lot of time and effort, and I want to get it done. I wish I had a little more time.
What is the book or books you've given most as a gift, and why?
That book is called The Empowered Wife, and it's because because I'm on a mission to end world divorce. I want every woman to get these skills in her hands, and they are all spelled out in that book, The Empowered Wife.
What's your morning routine?
Roll out of bed, check my emails, brush my teeth, shower, have some breakfast, talk to my husband about the news, and then get to my desk and talk to Dr. Lamar today.
And what advice would you give your younger self right now?
I would say that everything's going to be great in your marriage. It's all going to work out. You're going to have an amazing adventure. And a painful, wonderful journey. And it's all going to be okay.
If you were in the Mrs. America talent competition, what would your talent be?
My talent would be, it'd probably be punning. I'd probably come up with a whole bunch of puns, just right in a row.
Final question. What's your favorite sound?
I love the sound of those waves crashing on the beach when I'm playing volleyball.
I do too. Laura, thank you for hanging out with me today. You healed someone today. You poured into me. It helps me as I move into my next relationship and as I engage with other people as well about working on ourselves, not just working on our marriage. So it's been a pleasure. Wish you much, much success. Go out and pick up our book, but you got to let us know, how can they get in contact with you?
I've got something really fun going on right now. You can go and get the Adored Wife Roadmap for free at lauradoyle.org. And it's got an overview of all the 6 intimacy skills. And it also talks about the 3 most common mistakes I see women making, trying to get his time, his attention, his affection. So you want to go get that at lauradoyle.org for free.
Got you. And that's DOYLE. Thank you again. I cannot do this without my great musician, Supremacy, for our theme music, but all of you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe if you like this show, and I'm sure you did, because if you did not, something is wrong with you. Leave a comment. Stop being stingy. Share me with all of your friends if you want to know more about me, because maybe you want to pick up maybe my books as well. Go to drdrlds.com. And as always, believe that something wonderful is about to happen and that some people miss the message because they are too busy looking for the mess, but not you, because you've been listening to Sound Bombing.